items, but before everything, I just wanted to say that we are recording the session so that it's available for folks afterwards, for those who can't join us, and also a reference to you as you're working on your application. So we're gonna talk about who is New York Theater Workshop and what we do. What is the 2050 Artistic Fellowship? We're gonna go through the application process and details, and then we're gonna have a conversation with a past fellow, Andrew Rodriguez here. And then we are going to go through your Q&As at the end of the session. So I invite you all to please use the Q&A feature here at the webinar and just write them throughout the session, and we're going to get to them at the end of our conversation. And now I'm going to pass the mic off to Leo, my colleague at New York Theater Workshop.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Salma. Just want to ditto the welcome to everyone here that's tuning in virtually, and really ditto the flexibility for the reschedule. As Salma said, we're just going to sort of start with talking a little bit about who is New York Theater Workshop. And I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Leo Angulo. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the Artistic Programs Manager here at New York Theater Workshop. So what is New York Theater Workshop? New York Theater Workshop is both producing theater and a developmental space, and we hold both of those in equal value. Where we do 4 or 5 productions in a season, we also do much more on the developmental side with some of the following programs. We do have a bi-weekly reading series called Mondays that happen every Monday at 3 p.m. We have 2 summer residencies at 2 partner colleges. The first is in June at Adelphi University. The second is in New Hampshire at Dartmouth College in August. And of course, we have the 2050 Artistic Fellowship, which is what we'll be speaking about today. And we also have a handful of lovely companies in residence that we get the privilege to sort of support and be in conversation with. Those companies in residence are the Dominican Artist Collective, JAG Productions, the Jupiter Performance Studio, Noor Theater Company, and Safe Harbors NYC. At New York Theater Workshop, our mission is to help people better understand the world with our art. We like to present and work on art that asks questions rather than answers questions. We are very committed to uplifting historically marginalized voices. We support many types of generative artists at all points of their artistic careers, both early career and new artists and artists that have storied careers. We, again, hold both of those in value. And we always center curiosity and experimentation with our work. So that's a brief overview of, what we're doing at New York Theater Workshop. We just started previews for one of our show, Marry Me, by the incredible Hansel Jung, directed by Lee Silverman. So we hope to see you at the theater to come see our shows. And we're also still running the Refuge Plays, which we are doing in co-production with Roundabout at the Laura Pels Uptown. Great. So that's a little bit about New York Theater Workshop. Now more about the fellowship specifically. So what is this 2050 Artistic Fellowship? In its history, New York Theater Workshop has had many different forms of artistic fellowships over at least a couple decades. But the current model that we are existing in, the 2050 Artistic Fellowship, has been our primary artistic fellowship for about the last decade. And what it is the 2050 Fellowship supports 6 early career artists who exhibit outstanding artistry and whose voices are underrepresented in the world of theater. This fellowship is geared towards artists that generate their own work, and we think broadly of who can be a generative artist. And for this fellowship, we consider directors, playwrights, and also solo performers. And also just to say that, we recognize that many of you will identify as multiple things and have many artistic practices. And we really welcome and encourage applicants that have, a robust artistic practice. When it comes time to apply, we will ask you to indicate what is your primary artistic practice, but just to sort of say out front that if you were to get the fellowship, we always encourage exploration of these other artistic practices, and we want to hold you as an artist as a whole. So that's who we support, and we prioritize community building, exploration, and meaningful conversation. This fellowship is really special, and it's our actually deepest and most meaningful sort of point of connection in our developmental side. Whereas these Mondays at 3, we have these readings once every 2 weeks, and we probably do 30 to 40 plays and see just as many actors and directors and writers, but we see those people for one day. These 6 fellows that we'll be choosing, we're with for an entire year. And we are really excited about that opportunity to really deepen those relationships with these 6 early career artists. Great. So then some more details about the fellowship. It sort of starts with a mandatory retreat in June of 2024, and it ends with a retreat in June of 2025. And the idea there is to bookend your experience as a fellow. And those retreats happen at the Adelphi residency in Long Island. And a fun little thing about these residencies is that both the incoming new cohort of fellows will be there, and the outgoing cohort of fellows will be there. And so there's a chance to do a bit of the passing of the baton, some mingling of these 2 groups. And it's a way to both end the fellowship and also to kick off the year to come with the new fellows. You also will have monthly fellowship meetings with your cohort that are going to be led by Miranda Heyman, who is our wonderful 2050 fellowship advisor, who could not be here today. And there's opportunities for work sharings that I would take the lead on sort of producing. And these work sharings can take many forms. They can be a one-day reading. They can be a full 29-hour workshop. It can be a more informal table read. Sometimes I've just curated a conversation around a specific topic. Really what we like to encourage folks to do is really use the resource to explore a project that's exciting to them. And there's a lot of flexibility that is offered in these work sharings. And they're not necessarily required, but that is an opportunity for all of the fellows to have a work sharing. And mentorship from the artistic staff. And I do just want to name sort of members of the artistic staff, myself as the artistic programs manager, along with Salma Sodi, who is our literary manager, are sort of the leaders of the fellowship program, alongside Miranda, who serves as the advisor and is most directly connected with the 6 fellows. But myself and Salma really serve as the sort of liaisons and point persons between you all and the artistic staff. And also Rachel Silverman and Aaron Malkin, our co-associate artistic directors, always make it a point to also have coffees and lunches with fellows and make sure that there's relationships there. And Patricia McGregor, our wonderful artistic director, also makes it a point to get to meet you all and be sort of in the orbit for the fellows. And we also like to make a robust invitation for you all to engage in the artistic life of New York Theater Workshop. There's many opportunities throughout the year and throughout the fellowship. Some of the fun ones are like opening nights for our productions. We have weekly artistic staff meetings for our department that we open up for the fellows to join, and community events that happen throughout the year. And the resource that I was referring to earlier is we offer both a stipend, a personal stipend that fellows just get to sort of take and put in their pocket and use for whatever they need to use for, and an additional artistic development fund that they can use to fund the work sharing that I was speaking to buy theater tickets to see shows that are happening around the city, for research projects that they may be working on, for projects that they're working on. Great. So that's a bit about what the fellowship is, but now I want to speak to sort of the process for what the application is. Many of you may have already started your applications, maybe you've already submitted your applications, or maybe you're waiting for this info session to sort of submit. But I'll sort of go through the whole process because it can be a long process, and then I'll go in detail about each step. So the first step is the preliminary application, and those are due next week, Thursday at noon. So as you work through those, just keep that deadline in mind. The next step after that will be, we'd invite a smaller number of folks to submit a full application. Folks that are invited to submit a full application will hear about that the last week of November, and those applications will be due in mid-December, those full applications. Those are then read and reviewed, and then the next sort of step is a group of folks will then be invited to be a part of a group interview And then from that, we then select a few people to invite to an individual interview in March. And then in mid to late March, we make our selections. So just to say, you know, some of you may be applying right now in October, and the end of the process isn't until late March. So it is a long process, and we value and appreciate all the work that folks put into the application process. And we really are excited to get to meet all of you through this application process. So I'll now sort of go step by step and speak in more detail about these steps. So what is the preliminary application? What does it consist of? What it consists of is a resume. And again, sort of speaking to the question of artistic practice, we're really looking for a resume that just exemplifies your artistic practice and your previous work, so we can get a sense of the type of work that you've worked on. And then a personal statement that is 750 words or less, responding to the specific questions below. What kind of work are you interested in making at this moment, and why? Are there questions that you try to pursue and interrogate in your work? And how does this fellowship at New York Theater Workshop specifically appeal to you as an artist right now? And I just want to speak that, like, these questions are an opportunity for us to get to know you more holistically as artists, and what your values as artists are, and what your sort of artistic practice and aesthetic is. So we really encourage you all to just be really specific and individualistic in your responses. I know some of you might be wanting to ask, like, what is a good answer, or what makes a good statement? And really the best answer to that is, like, we just want to get to know you, and this is our opportunity to get to know you as an individual. So I always recommend that folks just sort of speak from, like, the personal experience, and just speak authentically to themselves. And just so you all have a sense of, like, the review process, these preliminary applications, your statements and your resumes, will then be reviewed by members of the artistic staff in full, and each application is read by 2 separate people, so that not one person on our staff is making any decisions on one single applicant. So that's a preliminary application. And again, those are due next Thursday, October 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And those are applied via Airtable. And I assume you all have the Airtable link, but if there's anyone that doesn't have the Airtable link, reach out and we can get that to you. Again, if after the preliminary application, the staff members will then read and then make a selection of a smaller group to invite to submit a full application. And again, you'll be receiving that email right before Thanksgiving. And what you'll be asked to submit is a fellowship plan that outlines how you'd like to spend the fellowship year. And when we do send this call for a full application, we offer a bit more robust details about the fellowship, so that you can sort of speak more specifically about what your plan is for how you'd like to use your time and the resource for the fellowship. We always say that this is just a sketch and an idea for us to understand where your mind is at. We don't hold you to anything that you say. If you speak to certain projects that you want to workshop during your fellowship, if and when you do become a fellow, you don't have to do those workshop projects, you can do something else. So just to sort of alleviate some pressure as you begin to do your fellowship plan, this is just to sort of get a sense into your head of what you would want to be doing and how you'd want to be using the resource in this current moment, always acknowledging room for change. And then the next part is a work sample. And so if you're applying as a playwright, what that is a full-length play. And we often say, you know, submit a play that is like your sort of most complete play, a play that you feel the most proud of, and also a play that you feel is the most representative of who you are as an artist, as a playwright, in terms of plays. And for directors, it's a bit of like a director portfolio. And what that looks like is production images or videos with corresponding descriptions. So we either ask for 6 pictures and 6 images from a production that you've directed, and we ask you to describe 3 of those pictures, talk about what's happening in this moment, how did you get to this moment, what directing challenges did you overcome to get to this moment, just contextualize 3 of the images that we're looking at. If you want to do video, you're welcome to do up to 3 video clips that total no more than 15 minutes for all 3. And you can also provide the same sort of context and paragraph for your video clips. And for solo performers, we encourage you to use either text or image or video, whichever you feel best exemplifies your work as a solo performer. And we really are looking for solo performers, a demonstrated sort of experience in solo performance, and again, something that's really representative of you as a solo performer. And we also ask for one letter of recommendation from a mentor or someone you've worked with in your artistic life. And so these full applications, we open up who reviews that a little bit more. More of the artistic staff reviews them. And we also do invite a handful of previous artistic fellows to be a part of this review and reading process, just because we like to have people that actually went through the program sort of speak to who may be a good fit for this fellowship. And again, we'll let folks know in late November who is invited to submit a full application. But if you are invited to submit a full application, those will be due Thursday, December 14th. Great. That, I think, is all that we have for the process. And again, as Salma said in the beginning, if you have specific questions that you want answered in terms of the process, put those in the Q&A and we can get to those at the end. But now I'd love to invite my lovely friend, Andrew Rodriguez, to join me so that we can sort of have a bit of a conversation about his experience. Andrew was a fellow just last year. He was a fellow, directing fellow. Andrew is an actor and a director based in New York City, a creator and collaborator for dance, theater, and film. Andrew is dedicated to developing and creating new work. He collaborates with artists to create worlds that explore elements of human behavior through live performance and movement. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for
Hi.
and I just want to shout out that Andrew really saved us and is coming to joining us a bit last minute. And so thank you again, Andrew, for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. How are you doing? How have you been?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited that it's Friday. Great. So I have a few questions that I have for you just so that we can sort of speak to experience, and hopefully in reflecting on your experience can give some insight for folks that are wanting to apply. My first question is, like, if you can just speak to sort of your journey leading up to the fellowship. Like, what were you doing in the few years before the fellowship, before you applied? And the second half is like, what have you been up to since then? Acknowledging that it ended like just a few months ago. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about yourself and your journey.
For sure. Yeah. I trained as a theater educator for K through 12 at UT Austin. That was like what my degree was in. But I was mostly working as an actor in Austin, Texas, with like the Rude Mex and a bunch of other theater companies in town. And that's where I started to find my passion for new work. I got started directing my senior year of university. I graduated in 2019 and then moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where I was an acting apprentice at Actors Theater of Louisville for a year. And then, of course, the pandemic happened in 2020. So I'm originally from Texas. So I moved back to my small town in Texas for a couple of months. And then I moved to New York City in October of 2020 because I was hired. I was working at the Juilliard School within the drama division, and I was the apprentice for a year. So I stayed in residence at Juilliard from 2020 to 2021. After my residency at Juilliard was up, I was hired at Atlantic Theater Company, where I still work today. But in the midst of working at Atlantic, I applied for the 2050 fellowship and was in residence with the Theater Workshop from 2022 to 2023. And now I'm still at Atlantic. I'm the artistic director of conservatory student productions, where I work with all of our actors in training. I hire the directors that we work with at Atlantic. And I also teach advanced movement and acting in our NYU program.
Great. Thank you so much. And I know the Atlantic Acting School has one of their productions up right now, right? Or is it done? Sanjay's The Wolves?
Yeah, it's just up right now.
Yeah. And Sanjay Kim was also a fellow, I think in 2018, 2019. She was a directing fellow. We love Sanjay. Great. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about how you sort of got to the fellowship and what you've been up to since. And I think that leads me to my next question is, like, how do you feel that the fellowship helped you grow in that year? How do you feel like you grew as an artist and as an individual?
Well, I think I've been I've been around so many different like theater companies and institutions and places, and I think like one of the greatest things about the fellowship that made me, I guess, like grow and blossom was it made me feel like New York Theater Workshop is an artistic home. It's a space that allowed me to be bold, brave, and uncompromising, not just with the work that I was interested in exploring, but also with myself. I left with like a really fun project that I still can't stop thinking about. And you know, it's a piece of dance theater that I think I can continue to hone and shape while I'm establishing myself as like an artist here in New York City. And I think like what a gift an institution can give an individual and an artist, right? One of the things I also did with the fellowship is I traveled outside of the country for the first time to sort of train and research with Oja Naharin, a choreographer that I admire in Batsheva Dance Company at a dance center in Italy. And I think like all of those experiences informed not only the work that I am interested in doing, but also myself as an individual, the kind of work that I want to share with others. And it truly feels like a welcoming, warm environment. And I think like that's one of the best things a fellowship can offer is actual fellowship.
Great. Thank you so much. And I also just want to sort of shout out you talking about one, I mean, loved your project, and to continue developing it. And also the research trip that you took to sort of take those classes. And, I spoke to it very briefly before, but we have this artistic development fund. And I do see a question in the Q&A that I'll sort of answer. So again, we have the stipend that we give you all, and the stipend for the year is $5,000, and that's paid in 2 installments. And it's one installment sort of in the first half of your fellowship in the first month or two. We give you that first half of those $5,000 stipend, and the second half of that stipend comes in the spring and about March. And again, that's $5,000 in your pocket for the fellowship, for living expenses, for whatever you need. And separately, there's a $5,000 artistic development fund that you can use, again, towards a work sharing. And Andrew did use part of his artistic development fund to hire a sound designer, to hire actors, and to like do a 29-hour workshop and be in the space for a week. And we also, give him the rehearsal studio to have for a weekend to do his work sharing. And also he still had money left over. So he spoke with me and he's like, I really want to hone in on my choreography with this one specific choreographer. And so we helped supplement those classes that he took in Italy. So seemed like a lot of fun. And,
It was so much fun.
Oh, good. We encourage folks to be creative with how they use their artistic development fund. And we do name that it's an artistic development fund, not a professional development fund. And sort of what that means is what is something as like an artist that you really want to continue to explore, that you want to hone in on. A lot of that may be part of this sort of workshop that you work on for a project. A big chunk of that might go to your work sharing, but also like if there's classes you've been wanting to take, if there's a research trip for a specific play that you're working on, it can be pretty flexible, and you will be in communication with both myself and with Salma and Miranda to figure out what is the best use of my artistic development fund. Great. I mean, you may be starting to get to this, and like you sort of spoke to the end about like what felt special about this fellowship was what there was fellowship between your cohort. Do you have a favorite memory of the fellowship, of your fellow fellows that you want to speak to?
Oh my gosh, I do. Yes. I remember one of the monthly meetings. I was just talking about this the other day with somebody actually, so it's funny that you bring it up today. We brought in a chef to come teach us how to cook a meal. So we all cooked a meal together, not just the artistic fellows, but the artistic staff. And the chef who we brought into the meeting and taught us how to make a lasagna. And it was such a profound moment of community building, just sitting around a table, cooking a meal, and then afterwards sharing it together. And I mean, I always think back to like, where else can that happen but New York Theater Workshop, right? Like it was so special to sit in the place that we've been having all of our artistic fellowship meetings, and it be completely transformed into this moment where we're all coming together to share a meal, tell stories. The chef is telling us, her personal stories, and we're sharing our stories of community building and building a delicious lasagna and eating it at the end of the night together. And I think, one of my favorite that's my favorite memories. That's one of my favorite memories. But I think, like, even as I look back at like all of the other meetings, there was always a special element, whether it was a person coming in to have conversations with us, or we were having conversations with each other. And I think being able to just have a cohort or even this ensemble of people that you can connect with, whether that's the artistic staff at New York Theater Workshop, or the administrative staff at New York Theater Workshop, or your fellows that you're in fellowship with, not just the artistic fellowship, but also the administrative fellowship, was just such a gift. So all of my favorite memories are about the people that I was in communication with and building connections with.
Great. Yeah, I can concur that that was a really fun night. As Andrew was saying, it was really nice to sort of have Alex Coons, who is the wonderful chef who runs, I don't know if anyone who's watching is familiar with Babe Town, a sort of queer supper club, and she's just doing incredible stuff. And we're actually partnering her with for Marry Me. So there's a Babe Town dinner party that is in conjunction with one of the performances of Marry Me. But yeah, that was a really special time. And I think that like we responded to the fellows' sort of curiosity about like wanting to identify and see like cooks and chefs as their own sort of artists. And like she spoke to like what her life, how she views her chef as artist, her chefing as artistry, and her process. So that really was a lot of special fun. And I did forget to sort of speak more robustly about these monthly meetings. So thank you for the cue. These monthly meetings can take many forms, right? They happen once a month, and it's the 6 fellows along with Miranda, and it's up to you all to figure out how you want to use that time. And oftentimes cohorts like to invite people to come in and have conversations with them. In this instance, we did this cooking class. Sometimes there's outings to see, like if everyone's really excited about seeing this one show, we all come together to see a show. And there is a separate group fund that we use towards that. So if there's a group outing to see a show, we can pull from that group fund so that you're not pulling out of your own individual fund. For this sort of cooking dinner party, we bought all the supplies and we bought the wine using this group fund. So it really is a self-driven opportunity. And we often say that as a fellow, you are the artistic director of your own fellowship. And so sometimes that happens individually with, Andrew really wanted to go continue his exploration as choreography. And so he went to take these classes in Italy, and the group wanted to learn more about cooking. So we took the cooking class. Great. My next question, Andrew, for you is like, what would you tell someone who's interested in applying or thinking about applying for this opportunity? What's something that someone who's applying should know or needs to know or wish you had known before you applied?
I think you should write out your goals, but also remain flexible. So allow your goals to be this sort of roadmap, but be open to the detours and pit stops that you'll take, as a fellow. I think in your application, be specific and don't settle for anything less than precise and clear thought. The specificity in your application will be resonant with the people who are reading your application. I found it super helpful to read the mission of New York Theater Workshop and the values and see where you find alignment and articulate the ways in which your own artistic mission lives perpendicular to New York Theater Workshops rather than parallel. You get the experience you make, just like what Leo said. So lean into all the fellowship has to offer you. And in your application, speak to those things that excite you and fuel you and bring you passion and joy. If that means going to Italy, great. If that means, sitting around a table cooking lasagna, that's also a value. So really, really assess what the fellowship has to offer and how you'll like what your understanding of those resources are and how you'll utilize them. And also have fun. Being part of a fellowship was so much fun. It was an opportunity to build community. I mean, I've been in New York for 3 years, and when I was doing the fellowship, it was really 2 years. And so it was an opportunity for me to meet so many new people, not just in the fellowship with me, but within the staff, within, the ushers, or, all over the workshop. That was such an opportunity to get to know people and build community here in New York City.
Great, thank you. I think you also started speaking about this, but like, if you can go back and think about when you were writing your application, and you spoke about being specific, but do you have any other tips or reflections about the application process, whether it's the statement, whether it's the full application, or advice to like how to sort of navigate the entire process? Because again, it can be a long process, and so I'm just curious if you have any reflections about your process, and how you remember applying.
Yeah, I started with the project. Like I knew exactly what project I wanted to do. And so I knew exactly what I wanted to explore in terms of project development. And I started from that passion point and worked kind of backwards, which was helpful for me. I'm not sure if it's helpful for everyone, but if you already know there's a project that you're passionate about, or a play that you've written, or something you want to direct or create in the room, I started from that passion point and sort of figured out, well, if this is the project and this is what I'm proposing, then what do my work samples have to be? Or what do I need to articulate to convey that that's the kind of work that I want to continue generating? And this fellowship is the stepping stone to help me create that kind of work, right? I think it's about really being honest with yourself and honest with the panelists of what those goals are. When I submitted my work samples, yes, they were images with descriptions, but I also slipped in there some audio to go with them, which I think was really helpful because, as Leo mentioned, I usually always work with a sound designer, and for choreography, it gave the panelists a sense of my work, which I think is key. They need to understand what kind of art are you generating, what is the impact that it's having on you, on the people that you're working with, on the people seeing the work. It's crucial in those work samples that they understand your artistic goals, your artistic values, your artistic mission. And then I think in terms of like the writing components of the application, I think you should speak to the ways in which the fellowship will specifically support your growth as an individual and how you intend to be part of a community of artists. It is a fellowship. You're going to be working with a cohort or another of an ensemble of people. So it's essential for the panelists to understand how you will also play a role within that ensemble. What are you looking forward to in terms of interacting with other people, not just your fellows, but also the artistic life of the theater company that you're in residence or in fellowship with for the full year. And I think if you're able to articulate those goals and be hyper specific with all of those different points, you're creating a well-rounded application, and all of a sudden you understand what your fellowship plan is, and you're able to pull from those previous resources if you're from your preliminary application and bring those back into your full application, and creating a really robust, well-rounded application that gives the panelists a sense of how you'll spend your year.
Very well said. I think that's all really apt. And I think as someone who sort of has been reading these applications for the past few years, I very much agree with what you say in terms of what helps us just better understand who you are as an artist and as an individual. It's like everyone has their own sort of stories and journeys. So it's like, we're ultimately tasked with the task of like, making a decision, but like it's less about comparing people, but it's like who are you and what have you done and what excites you and how do you make art and how do you plan to make art in our space for a year. So I ditto everything that you say. And you started speaking about this, but I'm curious just because I found you to be a very involved member in like the artistic life of the larger theater in the organization. So if you could speak a little bit more about like sort of some reflections, or what was your favorite opportunity outside of the monthly meetings, outside of your work sharing, the things that are not necessarily required of a fellow, but that are offered to a fellow. Which of those was most meaningful to you, or what was your experience sort of engaging in that way?
Oh man, so much, but a couple come to mind. One of the first ones is being in the actual space that you're sitting in right now, Leo. Like sitting in that table, like around the artistic staff and around the individuals who work at New York Theater Workshop was such a gift, right? Even if you're sitting with your laptop working on your project or working on something, the ability to just be available to different people that are walking through the workshop, whether they're an artist or a member of the staff, was such a gift. Those informal conversations, I still think about them today, and how they sustain the relationships that I have with people at the workshop. I also think about the opportunity to be able to read new plays and be in conversation with, I know earlier you talked about the Adelphi residency and the Dartmouth residency and the Mondays at 3, being able to listen in on the conversations of, hearing Patricia, the artistic director, or Rachel, or Aaron, or Leo, everybody just having conversation about the play that we all just read collectively. And again, it's about finding out who this artist is, how do they make work, right? It's not just, that doesn't just apply to the fellows, it applies to the work that I think is being produced at New York Theater Workshop. And so being able to be a part of those conversations and invited to them and being able to read the actual plays is, such a gift. I think new work for me is such a fun opportunity to get to know individuals as artists and what they're passionate about. And so sitting around a table and having those conversations bi-weekly, or whether they were weekly, whenever, we were really reviewing those plays and those materials, was unique. I think it offered so much insight into, what I'm currently doing as an artistic director at Atlantic, and the kind of work that I want to continue doing, supporting playwrights, supporting emerging directors, and creating my own work, and finding ways to support generative artists. So those informal opportunities, like Leo mentioned, are not required, but certainly informed my work that I was doing, in terms of when it came time for my project development and the feedback session. I knew exactly what that process was going to look like, and I was able to effectively prepare to make sure that, that 29-hour workshop that I did, I was able to get the most mileage out of it, and continue developing outside of the workshop.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you in those meetings. And I always re-up and encourage folks that are the current fellows of like, come when you can to these meetings. Like you can see how the sausage is made. You sort of get an inside scoop into like all the work that we're doing for our productions, for our developmental work. We invited the fellows to help read and curate these summer residencies and these readings. So really it is a fulsome and genuine invitation to be a part of the artistic community of the theater, right? Like we take it seriously that the 6 of these fellows are in residence for a whole year. And we always value sort of more just opinions and voices in that conversation. And I think it's really great that you point out that like you sort of being a part of those processes, coming to other Mondays at 3 meetings can help informed you of how you entered your work sharing and sort of your goals and what you were hoping to get out of it. Well, great. This has been a lovely convo. I think we can now pivot to answering some questions in the Q&A. And also just want to uplift folks. There are some questions that I see here in the Q&A that we'll start getting to. And also if you have another question that you're thinking about, drop it in. If you don't know how to word it, we can workshop it together. This is now really the opportunity to give you all really specific feedback and answers to questions that you might have about this process. And also just shouting out that on our website, nytw.org, we have a artistic workshop or artistic fellows page, and there's a whole list of FAQs of frequently asked questions that you can see there. And I'll also shout it out now, and I'll shout it out at the end. But if you have questions that aren't answered here, or if you're still thinking about how to formulate the question, or you just want to send it in an email, you can email fellowshipinfo@nytw.org. Yes, that's what it is. It's on the last slide, so I'll double check. But great. So we'll now go to the Q&A. Salma, if you want to hop back on too, happy to have you back on screen. So
can I just uplift one thing before we move forward? I just want to also mention and shout out to our season this year that both Hansel and Nathan Allen Davis were previous fellows. And they were, I think they were also in the same cohort. So
yes.
just
yeah, it's an exciting thing. And we sort of, when I mentioned that, like, it's a really fulsome way we engage with folks, like it continues on after the fellowship ends, and Andrew's here, and it's really great to have him here, and we stay in touch, and we really try to cultivate community and just keep growing our community of artists. Great. So I'll go just down the list. I see that Danica asked a question about for directors and for the work sample when we request that. The question is, can we submit a combination of video and images? The answer is yes, you can. You can do a few pictures and a few clips. And when we do send out this invitation for a full proposal, we'll be like super clear about how to submit, what it should look like, how to format it, how many pictures, how many videos. But the short answer is yes, you can definitely submit a combination of both video and images. I see a question here about part-time students, whether they're eligible for the fellowship. We don't accept folks that are going to be currently enrolled in an academic program. If you are currently in your last year of your program, whether that's undergrad, grad school, high school, you're welcome to apply in that sort of final year, because the fellowship doesn't start in earnest until September. There is the mandatory retreat in June, but in terms of like monthly meetings and the fellowship starting, that doesn't start until early fall, September. So, but unfortunately, if you're still going to be enrolled in an academic program, you cannot concurrently be an artistic fellow. Great. There's a question here about the director projects and whether the fellowship's more geared towards more devised generated work, or it could be something that's workshopping of a new play that is challenging and needed in development. We value both, and we've done both, and we support both within the fellowship. Really, it speaks to, I think, who you are as a director, and like if you're someone that really likes to devise and generate work with a cohort of collaborators, there's space for that, for you to invite your collaborators and to pay your collaborators for your work sharing to devise something together. And you can also bring in a new play as you're asking to help develop it with a workshop. I don't think we value one more over the other. I think it really is about what's most useful for you. We often say many people that are applying or are fellows are often like have other fellowships. There's other programs, other great programs out of other theaters that you may have had before, that you may have concurrently. And we always like to encourage folks to do the one that like is like the most outside the box or the most flexible, because we really try to value flexibility in what we do. We have 2 spaces that you can use. We have our rehearsal studio. We have our 4th Street black box that you can do workshops in. So I always say when I sit down with the fellows to ideate what their sharing is going to be, to just what is the most you can get out of what we offer in terms of resource, whether that's space, whether that's the Artistic Development Fund, whether it's our flexibility, whether it's the minds of our people and our staff, and like to help ideate and get to what project you want to do. Is what I would say there. In the preliminary statement, is it better to check off all the questions asked or do a deeper dive into 1 or 2 topics? I think my advice would be to make sure that all of the questions are answered, and really try to give answers to all 3 of those questions, just because that will give us the fullest sense of who you are as an artist and as a person. So understand the question, but I would say that answering all the questions in that statement would be best. Does the fellowship give you access to workshop shows for free? We sure do. The fellows get 2 free tickets to every production. So that's something that's offered to you as part of the fellowship. There's a question here. Give me 1 second. Outside of the monthly cohort meeting, how often would fellows be expected able to be present at some kind of meeting during the fellowship? What does the day-to-day life of an artistic fellow look like? I don't know if Andrew, I can answer it. I'll give my version of the answer, and Andrew, if you want to chime in, you can too. But I think this question's getting at like what are the actual expectations and requirements in terms of on site here at the theater, definitely these monthly meetings. And we work to set those at the retreat in June so that by the time you leave the retreat in June, you have the monthly dates for the entire span of the fellowship. We ask that people prioritize those and put those in their calendars because they are expected to be there in person for those monthly meetings. The other thing that is a sort of expectation is that you be present for your fellows work sharings, right? So with folks early on, and we'll set the schedule for when folks are doing their readings or their workshops, what have you, and we set the sharing date, and we'll circulate those around, and you're expected to be at the other 5 sharings that happen throughout the year. In terms of presence at meetings during the fellowship, those are the only sort of expectations. The opportunities are, as Andrew was alluding to, we have weekly artistic department meetings that the fellows are invited to join if they would like. We also have bi-weekly all staff meetings that the fellows will be invited to, that they're welcome to join if they would like. But like the day-to-day, sometimes you can go a few days or a few weeks, without being here, or we only see each other during these meetings. But the goal, I hope, is like try to bake in other opportunities for engagement and to sit around a table and to see art or talk about art. So again, that's sort of one of the things that it really is, how much you put into it and how much you're trying to be present here on site. We welcome as much as you'd like. But in terms of what's the expectation, it'd be those monthly meetings and then the other sharings for the other fellows. Great. Let me see. There's this, and this sort of, it's a similar question. What hours have fellows been available to work somewhere else outside of the fellowship? It's very flexible. I think, I don't know, Andrew, if you want to speak to what you were doing concurrently, but like we have the monthly meetings and those are 3 hours once a month. And the other fellow sharings, which end up being like 90 minutes to 2 hours, and those happen once-ish a month. But outside of that, there's no necessary expectation of you. So you're certainly able to hold a job concurrently. I don't know if you want to speak to how you balance that, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I worked full time at Atlantic while I was a fellow at New York Theater Workshop, and it's just having that open communication with your colleagues and saying like these are the dates that are not flexible as it relates to the monthly meetings and your fellows sharings, and just having that open dialogue with your workplace. Fortunately, Atlantic was very supportive and very championing in the sense of me being able to step away at certain moments and then return back. Again, like Leo said, it's very fruitful to also be a part of those meetings when you can be, or those workshops at like Mondays at 3s, to sort of just get to familiarize yourself with both the space and the people that make New York Theater Workshop.
Great, thank you. Let's see. I mean, this is a question that we do get a lot. I see here is, how do you define an early career artist, and what constitutes that? That can mean a lot of broad things, and we really are trying to support folks that are on the earlier side of their career. We're really looking for someone that has a developed artistic practice, right? Someone that is looking to develop an artistic practice. It may be harder for them to be successful in the fellowship. Just speaking to the fact that, again, as I have mentioned, as Andrew mentioned, like this fellowship really is driven by the fellow themselves. It's not super guided. It's not super prescriptive in that way. So someone that's the most successful is someone that really has a developed artistic practice and experience and sense of what to do with that time. And also it's someone that this resource is still valuable, and someone that may have had several major off-Broadway productions may not necessarily, that's someone that's falling more in the mid-career sort of area. It is purposely vague, and we encourage folks to apply regardless where you feel you are, but to give some parameters, there's a certain level of developed sense of artistic self that leads you to be successful in the fellowship, in terms of on this end. And then on the other end, if someone is clearly being supported in numerous other ways and like has had tons and tons of years of experience and opportunities, then that might be someone that is past the prime for the fellowship. But again, it is very flexible, and so we have a flexible view of what early career is, but we like to support folks that fall into that or identify as early career. And also, I just want to say explicitly that early career does not necessarily conflate with age. We made a conscious decision to not say young, because you can be earlier in your career at any stage in your life. People can pivot careers, come to theater later in life. So just to be explicit about that, early career is not a synonym for young. Great. What have been some past fellowship plans, projects? Let's see. So last year decided to like take the Music Man and explode it and stitch it back up together in a really exciting sort of like take on this sort of classical musical through fresh eyes, which I thought was really lovely. We already had one fellowship sharing this year, and they want to explore Night of the Living Dead, but set in the insurrection of January 6th. And that was sort of like a soundscape, sound laboratory director project. One of our directors last year wanted to try her hand at playwriting. And so she, with her artistic development fund, took some playwriting classes, and then it culminated in her writing this first draft of this play that she wrote herself and then directed herself. The playwrights are like, I have this really thorny play that I really want to like figure out. This is like this long, epic 3-hour play. And so it really ranges the gamut of what they can do. And again, there is no expectation. We are not gonna, we'll guide you of like, if you have questions, like I have these 2 projects, what should I do? We can have a conversation about it, but really we have no expectation or no of what you should be doing. Let's see. There's a question about, with the 6 fellows selected, is there a set amount of playwrights, directors, and solo performers selected? We always strive to have a balance of who's in the cohort. So we would never have a cohort that is 6 directors. We would never have a cohort that's 6 playwrights or 6 solo performers. So we really strive to have a balance of those, and just depending on the year, the exact sort of ratio shifts slightly. For playwrights, can we submit a play that has already been workshopped at another theater? Yes, you certainly can. I'm also sort of going through these quickly because we're a few minutes out from the end of the session, but I'll try to get to as many of these as I can. Are fellows able to shadow or observe in rehearsal New York Theater Workshop shows? Is this a case-by-case situation? It's certainly a case-by-case situation, but it's certainly something that we offer and we try to open up. Andrew, I know that you sat in on tech for, what show did you sit on tech for?
I sat in on tech for, I think, almost every single one.
There you go.
And then I was also in the movement workshop for the Half God of Rainfall. Yeah.
So we always try to advocate for the fellows if there's a desire to like sit in on part of the process. We try to make that an option, of course, in conversation with the generative artists of our productions, recognizing that sometimes a room might be more sensitive and might want to be a little bit more closed. And so obviously we respect that too, but there's definitely the opportunity there. And we try to have you all there as much as you guys want. For work showings, what kind of resource do fellows have access to outside of space? Access to light, sound, video? That just sort of depends a little bit. We, the one that we had last month, he used a big chunk of his fund to rent specific sound equipment because he knew that he wanted to achieve a specific soundscape. So he actually went to this sort of sound loft and rented some speakers, and that was a small chunk of his fund. We, of course, will always look in-house to see if what we can provide. We're always juggling a lot of things at once, and oftentimes a lot of our resources going to our productions. So it is a case-by-case situation, but I always encourage folks to ask. And I always try to advocate for fellows and try to get resource and support in those ways that we can. But just sort of framing that it's not necessarily a guarantee. We can always get you space. both spaces are equipped with speakers and a small soundboard. So we have projector that you can use. So there is some resource outside of the space that we can offer, and it always is a conversation in case-by-case basis. Do meetings usually take place during the workday or evenings? They usually land Monday evenings, about 7 to 9 is what we sort of do once a month. And that's usually what works best for folks given, the schedule of a theater artist. For playwrights, can we submit work that isn't finished yet? I personally would advise against that, because I think that we're trying to get a sense of who you are as an artist. I think if there's something that you're really, really excited about and you have, 75% of a draft, you could maybe try that. But I think we're really looking for a full, complete draft. If it's a new draft, that's perfectly fine. But we really are looking for stuff that is full. What does a successful fellowship look like by the end of their time with New York Theater Workshop? And maybe we can end with that question. Andrew, I'll let you go first. What do you think is a successful fellowship by the end?
I always go back to like you get the experience you make. And for me, I felt really successful in the sense that like, I was able to really use my resources down to like the last, I hate to say this, but down to like the last penny, right? Like traveling to Italy, still doing a 29-hour workshop on a project that I felt very passionate about and still feel very passionate about, and left with a community, a network of individuals that saw that work, that provided insight into that work, who provided insight to the work that I am doing as an artist and how I can continue to develop not just that particular project, but my entire scope of work and myself as an artist. And so I feel as long as you leave with a sense of like you are feeling changed or grown in some aspect, right? And measure it. I encourage everyone to like measure it at from the beginning of the year to the end of your fellowship, and see what those tangible goals, how they have shifted, how you have found sort of a different alignment, that will tell you how successful your fellowship was. And it's going to look different, between individual.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think it's successful if someone uses all their money. I agree. Use all of your artistic development fund. That would make me feel great. Because if you don't use it, you lose it. So, using all your fund, I really think like deepening yourself as an artist, as Andrew's sort of touching upon, and like feeling like you developed more of your craft, you sort of became more muscular in your artistry. I think feeling included as part of the artistic life of New York Theater Workshop. I would hope to think that that's how folks measure their success. And I would hope that we work to make sure that that's part of the fellowship, is that by the end of the year, you sat in on some meetings and you had conversations with Patricia and Aaron and Rachel and us, and that you sort of have become part of the artistic family and sort of network of New York Theater Workshop. I think some level of cohort development. I really think that what's special about a fellowship is, again, as Andrew said, the fellowship and the cohort that you sort of cultivate. So hopefully leaving with sort of lifelong collaborators or friends is certainly something that I would measure success for. And just to emphasize that again, that like it looks different for everyone, and we want to make sure Salma, thank you. The group fund, using all of the group fund, going on outings, and making sure that really you're taking advantage of the resource that we offer, and that you take initiative and like really make it your own. And again, it looks different for everyone, and we'll be in conversation with fellows as the year goes on. We are here to support folks. We're here to lead them and make sure that they have a fulsome and robust experience. I think that's a good note to end on. I really just want to thank everyone for spending the last hour with us on Friday the 13th. Very lucky day, I'll say. And really just everyone, thank you so much for your interest in this fellowship and for the application process. I'll say this spiel sort of to close out, is that we are going to get to meet a lot of you through this application process. And ultimately, we'll only end up with 6 fellows. But that doesn't mean that along the way, we're not getting to meet you and your artistry or read some of your great work. And so we often like to value and use this process, not only to get to 6 new fellows, but also to like understand folks that are really trying to build a career in this industry. And I just want to sort of say that we appreciate all the hard work that you will put into this application, and we will read with grace and humility, and we're so excited to get to read and to meet you. And yeah, if there are any questions that you feel weren't answered, please reach out to us. It is fellowshipinfo@nytw.org. Send us those emails, send us those questions. We'll get back to you. Reminder that the deadline is next Thursday, the 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern. That is a 12 p.m. Eastern and not a midnight. So please just be mindful of that. And if any questions arise, just don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all so much for spending this hour with us, and I hope you all have lovely evenings and a lovely weekend. All right. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.